Welcome inside the WCBL studios one more time as we head into the WCBL Championship final between the Sylvan Lake Gulls out of the West and the Regina Red Sox out of the East. It's a fantastic time of year. Obviously, the parks are going to be loaded with fans for the finals. It all starts tomorrow, Thursday, August 14th in Regina, and then heads to Sylvan Lake for Game 2 and then potentially Game 3 if necessary. But let's bring in my co-host today, Joe McFarland, as we break down both teams and the head-to-head matchup going into the final. Joe, what probably not expected final between these two teams necessarily, but maybe a little bit more expected than we think. Maybe we're not giving these two teams enough credit. Let's talk about these two teams first, just getting to the final in an exciting fashion on both sides of the divisions.
Yeah, kind of running under the shadows, right? When you think about all the accolades that were thrown at the Saskatchewan Berries out in the East, and quietly Moose Jaw gave them a big run for their money in the first round of the playoffs. And then Regina, they go back-to-back away team wins games 1 and 2, setting the stage for a jam-packed berry patch in Saskatoon for Game 3. And the pitching staff, man, you and I were talking about, I don't know, this pitching staff of Regina lost some big arms. How's this going to play out? And they've steamrolled Medicine Hat and then took the distance in Saskatoon. And thanks to the combination of two pitchers who have been absolutely dynamite in this playoff all throughout the course of the 3 games, especially when you look at the stats for Aiden Page. He's been electric. And then Chris together, a fantastic start, allowing just 2 runs against the most potent offense in the entire WCBL. Great job by the Regina Red Sox. And then on the flip side, the Sylvan Lake Gulls have been under the shadows for the last few years of the Okotoks Dogs, and finally the monkey is off the back. The dog is off of the Sylvan Lake Gulls, as the play-by-play team said it at the end of the game there in Game 2, as they sweep the Okotoks Dogs and they get to march into the WCBL Championship for the first time in franchise history.
Yeah, the dragon has been slayed. How many other animal metaphors can we come up with here today? We'll see how many we get. We got 3 so far. So Joe, let's break it down on each side. Let's start with the West Division. Let's look at the Sylvan Lake Gulls. Talk to me about their regular season, because it was kind of a tale of 2 teams almost. If you look at, there was a very specific point in the season where things just seemed to turn around. Can you tell me a little bit about the Gulls' regular season, and then after that we'll dive into how they got here in the playoffs?
Those who have watched us regularly know I've said this a couple of times. At one point, they were 14-14 on the season, and everybody's going, "What's happened to the Sylvan Lake Gulls? What's going on here?" And interestingly enough, the last game that they played in a Saskatchewan road trip happened to be against these very same Regina Red Sox. They come back home and they light on fire. They go 26-9 during the last 35 games of the regular season, and now they're 4-0 in the playoffs. And after Game 2 against Okotoks, sat down with Jason Chatwood for a little bit, and I said, what was the turning point? Was it that road trip? Was it like, what happened there? Interestingly, he said he wasn't actually on that road trip to Saskatchewan because he was still nursing an injury that he had suffered during that the Rural Roots game in Oyen. He took a foul ball in the not so gentle region. And so he had been off for a couple of weeks, and he came back and he says, I talked to my assistant coaches and said, what needs to happen? And he said the veterans needed to step up their game. So he had some very, as he called them, uncomfortable conversations with a few people, a few players. And he says the next day, the attitude in the room changed dramatically. They go on a massive heater. I think it was 8-game winning streak, or 7 out of 8 at home, and winning them all. And the tide turned, and the team even said afterwards, we were completely different. We were confident. It was a business trip every step of the way. And the Sylvan Lake Gulls just didn't look back from that, June 24th and on, and have steamrolled their way into their first berth in the WCBL Championship.
Yeah, and even if I'm scrolling just through their last few weeks, they were beating all the teams they needed to beat. They beat Okotoks a couple times. They beat Lethbridge a couple times to end the season, which I think always bodes well when those are going to be your opponents that you have to defeat to get into the final at all, and you can beat them kind of near the end of the year. You kind of have a much better feeling about it as you actually face those teams in the playoffs, and that's exactly what happened. They ended up facing the Lethbridge Bulls, who I don't know if they were necessarily favored. It was a very well-balanced matchup in terms of the teams facing each other. I remember talking about it with you when we were previewing the first round, and the season series was 4-4. There was some shutouts involved in there, but at the end of the year is when Sylvan Lake really turned it on, and I think that confidence level, like you mentioned, of those veterans kind of coming together must have boded well and obviously been a huge factor in both the opening round and against Okotoks.
I was talking to Josh Tucker after the game too, as well, against Okotoks, and he mentioned the fact that this was the first year where it felt like in that dugout there wasn't a scared factor involved in facing the Okotoks Dogs. He says in previous years they've kind of imploded a little bit. You think about last year in their 44-win season, and you go, that should have been the team to do it all. Even Jason Chatwood alluded to it. They should have been the most confident team going to the playoffs. But every time they faced Okotoks the last 3 years, it was like, oh, here are the big boys. Like, do we even belong here, kind of thing. This year, he says completely different. It was interesting, even being in the stadium for game 2, and I sat beside both dugouts and kind of meandered around a little bit, just to kind of pay attention to body language, pay attention to what's being said. And it felt more confident in the Sylvan Lakes dugout. And for the first time that I've ever seen the Okotoks dugout, there seemed to be some doubt. And that 6-run second inning was the big changeover where everything kind of changed for both teams. And all of a sudden, this is an Okotoks team that's not necessarily used to having to come back, not just from a deficit in the series, but a deficit in a game that early. And the pitching staff just didn't seem to have an answer for a revolving door of hitters in that second inning. And when you're playing from behind for that long and the confidence keeps building for Leroy Tavares and then the rest of the pitching staff, it was a very, very difficult game. And as we look at some of the highlights, like you got the sense, yes, Okotoks scored first. Sylvan Lake ties it. Then they put up a 0. It's 1-1 going to bottom 2. And then the floodgates go. And it's not like it was one big play that changed the trajectory of that game by any stretch of imagination. It was, here's a hit here, here's a hit here, here's a hit here. And it was very methodical. It was interesting to see because they'd have a runner on third and a runner at first. The runner at first would steal. So you got runners at second and third. Then you get a bloop single. Runner scores, runner on first and third, another stolen base, and it just became this. It was like watching an instant replay over and over and over again for the better part of half an hour as the Gulls put up 6 runs in that second inning.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the first 3 runs, it was like that's the same play 3 times in a row. Guys on second and third, a little bloop single to left field, scores one guy stuck at third. Same thing happens, and so I mean that's how you win baseball games in the playoffs, Joe. It's not always a slugfest. It's who can manufacture runs and who can kind of string things together, maybe get one big inning as a team, and then just shut it down. And like we're going to talk about it in a minute when we look at these two teams head to head, Regina and Sylvan Lake. But Sylvan Lake's pitching staff from start to finish this year has been one of the stingiest pitching staffs in the league, and it showed in the playoffs so far as they've been really, really hard to score against and get any offense against from the hop.
Well, and the other thing too for the Sylvan Lake Gulls is what they've been able to do in this postseason is depend on their starters to give them 5, 6, 7 innings. Right, Josh Tucker was fantastic in that Game 1 win in Lethbridge. You look at Matthew McKenzie was solid in Game 1 against Okotoks, gave them 5 innings, which allowed for the bullpen to do its thing. Game 2 against Okotoks, it's Leroy Tavares who comes in and gives them 6 innings, a solid ball, allows 1 run, strikes out. It was just it allows for your pitching staff to be still fresh versus I think what the Okotoks Dogs ran into was they ran into far too many games where it was 4 innings or 3 innings from a starter. And then you have to go into the bullpen deep, and those guys are not used to having to pitch, 3 or 4 innings at a time, kind of thing. And it just sort of snowballed on the Dogs a little bit at the end. I mean, a steady force like Brody Forno giving up hit after hit is not something that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, just watching this highlight, the excitement there. You saw the pitcher at the end of the game basically punch the catcher in the throat in excitement. Maybe don't do that again. Maybe give your catcher a break after he makes the game-winning play defensively. Don't punch him in the throat.
Especially Trip Ray, because it was Trip Ray's birthday. His dad's in the stands watching the game, and there's Mickey McClaskey giving him a nice shot in the chest. It's like, hey, hold on, like the birthday bumps can be later, man.
Yeah, and shout out, who would the first baseman have been there at the end of the game for Sylvan Lake? Would that have been Aiden Macris?
Aiden Akris, yeah,
Yeah,
that was a great snag, by the way, and he
great
got a
snag.
shout out at the end of the game from Jason Chatwood as well, because that whole play was sort of a bit of a mess, right? Because
Yeah.
the pitcher Mickey McClaskey goes in and goes, okay, I'm not going to take it. Trip Ray goes in and he kind of half bobbles it almost, and a nice dig by Aiden Akris. You and I have talked about the first baseman this year and not getting as much love as they maybe deserve, but Aiden Akris coming in big in a big moment like that. Interestingly enough, if you happen to notice, who's the last out for the Okotoks Dogs? The same guy who ended the season in 2024. Just a different outcome, obviously. Connor Croson, walk-off home run 2024. Connor Croson, final ground out 2025.
There you go. Well, it's poetic. Baseball's poetic. It always finds a way. It
Always is.
always seems to go that way. But let's talk about the Regina Red Sox now, Joe, because they're as interesting, if not more interesting, in terms of how their season went. Maybe it wasn't a tale of two teams, kind of like Sylvan Lake was, but in a way, it also was a tale of two teams, as there was a huge turnover on their roster midway through the year. Kind of shook the team to the core, but at the same time, once those guys got into place and they gelled as a team, it seemed like they really found their groove at the end of the year as well. They won 7 of their last 10 games heading into the playoffs, which obviously gave them a ton of confidence heading up against a very tough Medicine Hat opponent in the playoffs. But let's talk about their regular season, 29-27 as a team. But how did they get to where they were, finishing third in the East Division?
I was talking to Brady By near the end of the season there, and he said last year they won the division, then got swept by the Moose Jaw Miller Express, and he says that left a bitter taste in their mouths. And there's a little bit of turnover from that roster from last year, but there's still a few guys who are kicking around, like Brady By, who going into the season said, listen, we just got to get hot at the right time. Like, let's not focus on, making sure that we're pumping out big wins in the latter part of May and early part of June. Like, let's keep the ball rolling. Let's keep doing things the right way and not get super frustrated if things go sideways. And to your point, they were a 500 team this year or just above 500. It's not like they blew you away statistically. They were middle of the pack in virtually everything. And to your point, when you lose a Colton Anderson, when you lose some of those, that Blake Johnson, for example, you lose some of those big pieces. Jackson Searing's not on this team. You and I both sat here and went, we don't know. Like, it depends on how the new pieces all come into play. And the Red Sox did a great job saying, hey, we're not going to lose these guys. We're replacing them with other guys. And you see the guys like Spry and Page, and you have some big performances from some of the guys who've been there all year. And all of a sudden, this is a team that's feeling good heading into the postseason, despite even losing the Trans-Canada Clash against Moose Jaw Miller Express at the end of the season. They weren't losing focus or anything like that. And they go into Medicine Hat, they sweep the Mavericks, and a bit of a surprise twist in that series, given that Medicine Hat was the higher seed in that one. And then you go into Saskatoon, and you're going game one, in Saskatoon. You're thinking, okay, that's not the friendly confines, and you pull out the victory. Then you go back to Regina, thinking, and in front of a packed house, 1,700 plus in the stands for that one, and Saskatoon pulls out the victory. No panic, no frustration, no, oh, woe was me for this Regina Red Sox team. And they walk into game 3 and pull out the 6-2 victory. And a lot of it has to do with that pitching staff. Again, it wasn't much of a staff as much as it was two guys in Chris Spry and Aiden Page doing the damage, allowing just 7 hits, 2 earned runs, striking out 5, nothing flashy, not like they were striking out everybody, but they were inducing ground balls when they needed to, got some big defense when they got to, as well. As I looked at the score sheet, just 1 error. So there weren't any unfortunate incidents that led to extended innings, that kind of thing. And they were just very methodical about things and got runners across the plate when they needed to. And it was funny. It was very back and forth through the first 6 innings. And then Regina puts up that 3 spot in the 7th and didn't back, because Aiden Page has been electric in his 10 innings of relief work over 3 outings during these playoffs.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it's been just exactly that is that they haven't blown anybody away, but they've just kind of methodically chipped away here and there. None of their offensive numbers really stand out. I'm just kind of looking over some of their playoff numbers, just specifically the playoff numbers of some of their hitters, and their top hitter Brady By hitting 391. They got Jalen Myers hitting 375, and one of their best players who has come up with some big moments, Ian Montz, he's he's hitting 200 on the playoffs. Like, that's doesn't blow you away, but it's the timeliness of all when that all happens is what has come into play for the Red Sox. They get the timely hits. When they need them, those guys come through, and that's kind of been the biggest thing, I think, in terms of their offense. And then, like you said, they're not their pitching staff right now, I wouldn't call it necessarily very deep. But the guys who are getting the innings and who are getting the time out there are shutting teams down as to the best of their ability. Like you said, it kind of seems like they're pitching a starter about half the game and then a reliever half the game. That seems to be a strategy for the last at least 3 or 4 games that I've seen. And Aiden Page has probably put himself in the conversation for playoff MVP, depending on how this final goes, just with how good he has been coming into games for the Red Sox and basically not giving anything up when he gets on the mound. So keep an eye on that throughout these finals. Aiden Page could be maybe that X factor, I think, in terms of their pitching staff. But why don't we dive now into these two teams now head-to-head. Why don't we look at their numbers throughout the season, kind of compare the two, and have a look at how they match up. We'll look at their defensive stats here. As you can see, again, these are defensive, so we're talking defense and pitching. Earned runs, Sylvan Lake, huge advantage. Hits, Regina gave up more this year. Strikeouts, Sylvan Lake, huge advantage. Walks, pretty close. I'm not going to say that's necessarily an advantage either way. Obviously, Sylvan Lake has the advantage, but it's not that crazy. And errors, again, pretty much the same on both sides. So not a huge difference there, but those top 3 definitely tell a story. On the offensive side of things, Regina has the advantage. So this could be a little bit of that, what we saw early on with Brooks, I think it was, and Okotoks, where one team has a huge advantage on one side and the other team has a bit of an advantage on the other side. We'll see if that comes into play at all, if we notice that. A lot more runs for Regina this year, a lot more hits. Home runs exactly the same pretty much. Total bases, again, Regina gets a lot more there, and runs batted in a lot more on the Regina side as well. So they're scoring more as a team. They're putting more hits together as a team. Is that going to be a factor in this series? We'll have to see, because obviously, like we said, Sylvan Lake's pitching stats have a huge advantage there. And then head-to-head, obviously, they played each other only the 2 times. It was a doubleheader in Regina due to a rainout. Regina won both those games, but look at these playoff stats, Joe. And again, remember, Regina has played 1 extra game here, so that's why the averages are there. And when you look at the averages, there's a couple here that I'm going to say they're pretty damning, or maybe the other way around, show a pretty good strength. On the Sylvan Lake side, we look at those earned runs allowed, we look at those hits allowed. They're not giving up much at all over 4 games. So what do these numbers, as we look at these numbers with these two teams, say to you as we enter game 1 on Thursday night?
I say from a hitting perspective that it's very even.
Yeah.
Right. When you think about the hits, when you think about home runs are home runs, and it hasn't felt like a really home run happy kind of summer. So that's kind of to be expected, obviously. And interestingly, Sylvan Lake's 2 home runs came in game 1 against Okotoks, with Simon Baker's grand slam, and Jaden Flores hit one as well. The RBIs are pretty even as well. It's going to come down. It always does this time of year. It's going to come down to pitching and whose arms are going to be freshest. And it's something that I noticed in the second round is you could tell that some of the teams were really starting to struggle with keeping, especially with their off-speed stuff. The fastballs, they're zipping. Like, you're seeing guys throwing. Mickey McClaskey on Monday night against Okotoks was throwing 97, 98. And you could see even a savvy veteran like Logan Grant goes up against him. Yeah, and Logan Grant ended up with a single off of McClaskey, but the first pitch way behind. He's like, oh, okay, cool. But then you could see, especially I noticed it in the Moose Jaw series, for example, is the guys who you expect to be throwing really good, stuff starting to flatten out a little bit. So can you minimize the damage if you do have an off pitch or two? And can your defense step up? And so that's going to be maybe I wouldn't be shocked if it comes down to who's got the fresher pitching staff and who's got sort of that game plan ahead of every game. And I do know they call it the worst kept secret in Sylvan Lake, but talking to the coaching staff and talking to Josh Tucker, he hasn't pitched since game 1 against Lethbridge. Guess who's probably going to get the start in game 1 in Regina? I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark and say it's going to be Mr. Tucker again, Mr. 300. That's going to be a pretty tall task for the Regina Red Sox.
Yeah, and we talked about it. I remember when we were talking about the Moose Jaw Saskatoon series in round one about Weston Walls, and I said maybe they'll give him game one, and if they need him in game three, I wouldn't be shocked if they pitched him out there. I'm going to go ahead and take that take and put it on Josh Tucker. I feel like he's the strikeout king all time for a reason. Game one, guarantee, I would say. And then, like I said, if it gets to a game three situation and he's at all close to ready to go, if he's not on that mound at least for a little bit at some point in that game, even in a Madison Bumgarner type of closing situation, I would be shocked if he doesn't see the mound in game three as well, if it comes to that. But like you said, yeah, he has to be the game one starter. That would be, like you said, the worst kept secret. And then they have some options. That's the best part about what Sylvan Lake has going on right now, is they do have some options when it gets to that game two. Is it going to be McKenzie? Is it going to be Tavares? Who knows? It's up to the coach, obviously Jason Chatwell. But the best part about that, Chatwood, sorry. But the best part about that is options mean you have a couple of good pitchers at hand. And what I'm looking at with Regina right now is it's going to be, who is it going to be in game one that gets the start? It's probably not going to be Aiden Page, because he's been that late reliever kind of guy. So I'm guessing it's going to be a Colton Bank or maybe a Spry that does get that first game.
Udi Sanger maybe as well.
Udi Sanger has been getting starts as well. So there's a couple guys there for sure. But what I can almost guarantee you is that Aiden Page will see the mound at some point in game one, because that's just been his role, and he's been so locked down when he gets out there. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as they announce the starting pitchers on Thursday. We don't know that for sure right now, but as we mentioned, that's probably what we're looking at for game one, I would think, in Regina, as these two teams meet head-to-head for the first time since June 22nd. So that's going to be an interesting one, too. They don't know each other that well. There's not much familiarity there. And even when they played each other, we talked about this, there are two different teams from June 22nd, I would say. So you can almost throw any homework you have internally out the window. We can talk about it all we want, but internally for them, it's almost like, well, those two games don't really have a huge effect on what we're looking at now, because it's two different teams, I think. But before we go, Joe, there's a couple things we got to kind of wrap up. One more edition of the Play of the Week. Now, this one comes from Saskatoon left fielder Jaylen Freeman, who at the time when he made this play, it was a potential series-changing play. I'll let the play go here, and we'll talk about it after.
Second and out.
Watch that ball.
Hodgins.
We'll have a little bit of a zoom in on the play itself here. As you see, he makes the diving catch right on the foul line.
Grass.
Yeah, eats a little bit of grass there, yep. And then makes the throw for a double play at second base. Now, the reason why this was so crucial, Bryce, if you can just play that clip from the start and then pause it right at the start for me, that would be great. Just because there's a reason here. The Regina Red Sox were down at that point in the game, 5-4. Let's pause it right there. Bottom of the sixth inning, there's a runner on second base. Now, as you can see, if Jaylen Freeman doesn't make this catch, and I think it was a fair ball, that would have been an easy double, would have scored it, would have tied the game, would have potentially, at the moment, given Regina a really good scoring opportunity for the winning run in that game, kind of later in the game, which could have eliminated the Berries that night. But this was in game two in Regina. The Berries would end up holding on to the lead in that one and winning that game. So this was a huge catch for multiple reasons, the double play being one of them, but a great play by a very good defensive outfielder in Jaylen Freeman for the Berries, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, with Jaylen Freeman, he was lights out for the Saskatoon Berries. He was one guy that I was looking at. If Saskatoon had gone on to the championship, he'd be my early prediction for MVP. As much as Carter Beck's walk-off grand slam was big, Jaylen Freeman at the bottom of the batting order has just been outstanding, stealing bases, keeping the innings rolling, and really felt like he was a game changer both on all sides of the ball. So kudos to Jaylen Freeman. And again, kudos to both the Okotoks Dogs and the Saskatoon Berries on outstanding seasons. And again, an interesting side note we haven't really touched, the game plan to go forward is out the door for the Okotoks Dogs. So a massive shout out to the Dogs for creating history and becoming this gold standard. As much as they are not going to be in the running this year, a lot of teams now want to see if they can do what Okotoks did over the last 4 years here.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, kind of a storied franchise in a sense, but also kind of the flagship, right? It's the one you kind of want to base your model around in terms of how you run your team. So huge shout out to them. And the Berries, they're coming along as maybe that next one. They're coming along as that team that might become the model for the next couple of years, and we'll see how that all goes down as we continue on. But there's a couple of really cool alumni updates we got to get to, I think, before we end the show. And one, I'm just gonna cue you up here. Because there's been a bit of a yo-yo effect going on with Tristan Peters out in Tampa, but he's back up in the majors again. So what can you tell me about Tristan Peters?
Yeah, some exciting news for Tristan because he's been a guy that we've been talking about all year. Like, dude has been making all kinds of crazy grabs in the outfield for the Durham Bulls, and dude's having a great year at the plate. When will the Tampa Bay Rays finally call him up? Well, last week they did exactly that. They called him up. He made his major league debut on Friday. Still looking for his first hit. Unfortunately, things haven't gone the way he was expecting to at the plate, but certainly defensively has not been a liability or anything like that. They wanted to send him back down because of the numbers game and that kind of stuff on Monday. And then another injury happens. And lo and behold, on Tuesday, they said, hey, I know you're on the bus back to Durham, but can you get the bus driver to turn things around and head back because we need you? So he's back in the lineup again. And not knowing how long for, but hopefully Tristan Peters gets to make his major league first hit and maybe a first home run. That'd be kind of cool too. So looking forward to watching him with the Tampa Bay Rays. Another guy that we've mentioned quite a bit has just been zipping along. Eric Sabrowski, the former Edmonton Cracker Cats or Edmonton prospect, and now the Energy City Cats. So many different names in Edmonton.
A lot of names.
He's been phenomenal for the Cleveland Guardians since coming back from injury. He's lowered his ERA to 1.15 in 15 outings. He's over a strikeout an inning. Guy has been electric. And another former Edmonton player who got his first double-A home run of his career, Matt Kootenay, a 10th round pick of the LA Angels a couple of years ago. He is back with one of my favorites, and I don't have my hat with me right now, the Rocket City Trash Pandas.
Oh,
he's with the double-A team with the Los Angeles Angels. He's played at 3 different levels now, has 15 home runs on the season, 47 RBI or so. So a great story out of Edmonton and Wetaskiwin native as well, Matt Kootenay, doing some great things in the double-A level. And hopefully we get to see him a little bit higher up in the years ahead.
That's amazing. The Rocket City Trash Pandas, that's out of, I think it's Huntsville, Alabama, right? Because they have some space program stuff there, so that's why they call themselves Rocket City. So if you're wondering, where the heck is Rocket City? That's where, now you know, Huntsville, Alabama. My brother played college hockey there. Weirdest place in the world to play college hockey, but he made it work for himself. There's one other story, and it has nothing to do with the WCBL, but just on the terms of like the long runs in minor league baseball. I don't know if you saw this, Joe, but the other day, the Minnesota Twins obviously traded almost their entire roster at the trade deadline. They had a guy come up, 28 years old, so not that old, but 28 years old, 7-year run in the minors. Didn't ever think he was probably going to make it at that point. The Twins called him up as a kind of a show of good faith. First at bat, home run. You got to love that kind of stuff. So that, well, like you said with Tristan Peters, it's going to be super cool when it happens. And, storybooks are made about these kinds of things. That's why baseball is such a fun sport, because you can trudge along in the minors for 8, 9, 10 years. Get a call up, you never know when it's going to happen, and something cool might happen, and then you have that story for the rest of your life. So we all love baseball, and that's a huge reason why. It's just such a cool sport to keep an eye on, and you just never know when a big moment's going to come from anybody. So that's why it's such a cool sport. But Joe, speaking of big moments, the finals are coming up. Again, let's show that schedule for the finals. Game 1 is Thursday night in Regina, 7:05. Game 2 is going to be in Sylvan Lake, and then if necessary, Game 3 again in Sylvan Lake. Obviously, there's some travel stuff. That's why it's starting in Regina and ending in Sylvan Lake. But final thoughts, Joe. I'm going to give you the last word of the show here, and we'll get the people going here.
You know what? This is going to be an underratedly good series in my books. As far as, I mean, you can never predict what's going to happen. I said this about Sylvan Lake and Regina, Sylvan Lake and Lethbridge as an example. I said it about Regina and Medicine Hat, and both ended up sweeping. So what do I know about baseball? But it feels like this is a great matchup. 2 really good pitching squads in the playoffs so far. Some batting orders that have been able to manufacture some runs. They're not afraid of playing small ball. It's that time of year, and I feel like this year is there's going to be another signature moment. It just it's got that feeling like it's been building up and building up. Both teams are really excited. This is the first time the Sylvan Lake Gulls have been in the big dance. It's the first time since 2019 that the Regina Red Sox have been in the dance. Both communities are super hyped about their teams. I imagine the crowds are going to be ecstatic to see that. I heard 1,700 plus for game 2 against Saskatoon. I can only imagine it's going to be that way for game 1 against Sylvan Lake, and back in Gulls Stadium for games 2 and 3 if necessary. I suspect it's going to be a very raucous 1,800, 1,900, 2,000 kind of crowd in Sylvan Lake.
It's going to be fantastic. And two great crowds, I'm assuming, are going to be out on both sides. So it's going to be a really, really fun time. If you're in Regina and you haven't got your tickets yet, you might be out of luck. From what I hear, it's going really, really fast. I think they're opening up public tickets for anything that's available or left later today, I think it is. If you're watching this, it might be when you're watching this. And then Sylvan Lake, I can only imagine it's going to be into the thousands, and it's going to be a fantastic, fantastic environment there, as they've been doing all season long and for the last several seasons as well. So two great communities, two great teams, and two great storylines in terms of how these teams got here. And thanks for telling that story with me today, Joe. Appreciate that. For everybody in the back room, appreciate you guys doing this all season long. This is the final I'll call it the final season episode of this WCBL report. We're going to come back next week. Not sure what day yet. We're going to just drop it on you guys, but it'll be a kind of a season wrap-up show. We'll bring on president or commissioner, I guess, of the league, Kevin Kavami, and he'll give us a little bit of a story on how he thought the season went. We'll look ahead a little bit as well, so stay tuned for that. I'm not going to tell you what day. It's going to be a surprise. But we'll figure it out for you. Joe, appreciate your work all season long, and can't wait to see what you do in terms of covering this series throughout the next few days. Appreciate you joining me today.
Always a pleasure, Clark.
All right, that'll do it for us here today. For everyone at IKS Media, this is the WCBL Report, Championship Edition. Sylvan Lake Gulls, Regina Red Sox, Game 1, Thursday night. Can't wait. See you guys at the ballpark.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?